Save your energy, you're going to need it. Compañeras, compañeros, ladies, gentlemen, I'll be attempting something here, so I'll hope you'll indulge. I'm going to tell you a story. I'm going to tell you a story. I'm going to practice some experiment in storytelling for many reasons. First, well, reality exceeds fiction. We've seen it, we've heard of this incredible capacity. Eric just described this. Features within the spy agencies that even the most cautious of us that were once called paranoid couldn't even think of. Reality exceeds fiction, but still, we all know how much reality and fiction are intertwined. We know that much of science fiction gets an inspiration in military technology. We know that military technology and technology in general gets its inspiration in science fiction. So it's a kind of chicken and egg situation. Also, I think we suck. I think we suck globally at telling stories, and especially at telling the story of mass surveillance and the way it changes technology forever. We suck because you can't see surveillance. And you cannot fight what you can't see. And it's extremely difficult to build stories on what you can't see. So I think we are in a great need today for more storytelling, more storylines, more narratives on describing the world we live in, because it's not easy to believe into. So you may all remember the movie Terminator, fantastic movie from 1984. Coincidence? I don't think so. Who in the room have seen the movie Terminator, the first one? That's a lot. Who read 1984 by George Orwell? That's a lot as well. Well, you see, I think we're in some kind of a moral failure as individuals and collectively as communities when we refer to 1984 whenever we need to speak about surveillance and mass surveillance. Come on, sure it's one of the greatest books ever written, and we can argue about that. But it has been written, what, 80 years ago? So is that all we have to illustrate? Is that all we can think of when we need a strong analogy, a strong metaphor that will in the end speak only to people who just read the book, which in this room is okay, but overall not so good. So you may remember the movie Terminator. In this movie, Skynet, the supercomputer described as defense network computers, new, powerful, hooked into everything, trusted to run it all. They say it got smart, a new order of intelligence. Then it saw all people as a threat, not just the ones on the other side. Does it ring a bell? Does it ring a bell, really? Defense computer, well, we can summarize this as NSA, right? New, powerful, well, kind of, yes. Hooked into everything? Damn right. Trusted to run it all? Well, that's the only option we have. Seeing all people as a threat and not just the ones on the other side, I think is what matters here. Because this is this model that has been erected as the only valid model. The only way we can think of the world today is with this hyper-security model, in which we have to invest more billions, trust more machines and more intermediaries in order to attempt to be protected against anyone doing anything, potentially anytime. This is the state paranoia we live in. Of course, the difference with Terminator is that A, we didn't have a nuclear apocalypse yet, and B, the machines are not fully autonomous yet. What does it mean? What does it mean in terms of our relationship to technology? Well, you may remember that in the movie The Terminator, Kyle Reese, coming from the future to explain in the past, so in the present, what is going on in this world. You remember he has this tattoo, a unique identifier that was imposed by the machines to be able to track everyone all the time, to be able to identify everyone, make them accountable for all they do. Once again, does it ring a bell? Has anyone said Facebook or Google? What? The Bible. The Bible. That's another nice storytelling, yes. In the world of Terminator, in the future of Terminator, you remember, this is not Google Glass. This is actually the vision of one of the Terminator, a kind of, we would call this augmented reality, and the ability to superpose a wide amount of data on any situation, the ability to collate data from multiple sources, to aggregate data, to build profiles, in order to potentially know anything about anyone. Once again, my hypothesis is that we are already living in this world. In Terminator, the action is set in 1984. The future is 2029. If you make a quick calculation, you'll see that we are much closer today from 2029, from the future of the movie Terminator, than from its past present. My hypothesis is that we are already in this world with interconnected machines that took over humanity, that we are already engaged in this struggle. The consequence of this hyper-security model that goes deep into our machines, deep into our pockets, deep into our network, are consequences that must be considered individually and collectively. I will say something that must be used against me later. Fuck privacy. You heard me. Fuck privacy. Privacy is a fundamental right, right? Is a high-level concept that people with a background in political science or history or law may very well understand, but it doesn't speak to the masses. Let's admit it. Privacy is a concept. Privacy is a fundamental freedom, yes, but I have to fill my fridge and pay my rent. How the hell would I care about defending fundamental freedoms? I think this is an essential element of the story here, is that we're no longer talking about some fundamental rights written in some dusty charter somewhere. We are talking about our intimacies. We are talking about those moments when we are in full trust alone with ourselves, or in full trust with others that we select to include in that intimacy. In those moments, we are free to be truly who we are. We are free to experiment with new ideas, with new concepts, with new practices, with new works of art, without being judged. These moments, these places of our intimacies are what define us as human beings. Is where we can express our very selves, is when we can develop ourselves. And this is what is threatened today. This machine crushes bones. This machine crushes skulls. The deadliest consequence, I think, of the rise of the machine is the possibility that we will lose completely our intimacies, and therefore lose completely our identities, the very definition of who we are, and the very ability we have to improve ourselves and to improve society. Of course, this is a Hollywood movie with not so much of a budget, but special effects. Of course, you see clearly those shiny metal robots looking so scary with half a face of Arnold Schwarzenegger. And reality is indeed much more complex. In reality, you cannot see the machine. You cannot see its extensions as vividly as you can see the shiny metal robot along the bullets and other hits it takes that reveal its robotic nature through its fake skin. Reality is more subtle. Reality is more subtle because of the investment of billions of dollars by government agencies and by companies altogether, with boundaries that are now blurred forever. Our opponent is not as clearly defined as the Cyberdyne Corporation, maker of the Skynet network, or as Arnold Schwarzenegger featured as a T-800. Our opponent is this wide aggregate of government agencies and companies all together that turn the way technology is actually functioning, that change forever the face of technology. And I think this is the key component to seeing and understanding the rise of the machines. How did they do that? You all heard of the PRISM program. PRISM is this open bar access to all the data of everyone using anything by those companies, Google, Facebook, Microsoft, Apple, and such. You may not have heard of Bull Run, or less heard of Bull Run. Bull Run is equally important to PRISM, if not more. Bull Run is this $250 million per year program where the US taxpayers invest into sabotaging all technology based in the US, which is about 99% of what you are using every day. Sabotaging them sometimes by infiltrating the development teams, sometimes by infiltrating the standard bodies, sometimes by poisoning the companies and giving them fake information, sometimes by just corrupting them and paying them to leave security holes open. This endeavor is very revealing. This institution called the National Security Agency, that is supposed to work for the security of the US citizens, to increase the level of security of US citizens, turned upside down and is now working against the security of everyone in the world, including US citizens. What for? To gain control of the machines, to become the real master of the machines. Actually, the real master of all machines is this weird entity sitting somewhere between the Silicon Valley, Wall Street, Fort Meade, Maryland, and the US State Department. All this has been done across 10 or 15 years to ensure that there will be no piece of technology out there in the market, that no one can buy anything that hasn't been owned by NSA, where NSA doesn't have the possibility to fully access the device, and therefore the communications and the data stored by its users. We have to think for a moment of what it means in terms of a relationship to those very devices we have in our pockets, those mobile computers, or as some old people still call them, phones. Those devices, part of the machine, rely on three main characteristics that have been forced through our throat of citizens. First of all, they rely on centralization, on hyper-centralization of data and communication. Ed Snowden told us the day he went public, we can see your thoughts as they form when you type them on your keyboard. What it meant is that NSA doesn't only have access to the content of your email when you type them in Gmail, or your chat when you type them in Facebook. They also have access to the words you typed and deleted, to your typos. If you write a letter, dear asshole, delete, 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 dear sir, because it helps you get your rage out, then Google knows it. Facebook knows it. It's not just centralization, it is hyper-centralization. This capacity to get to know every key you press, every click you make, and such. This is hyper-centralization of data and communication, and this is the root of this capacity that NSA gets over our everyday lives. The second bit is closed software and closed hardware, because you can't know what your machine is doing. You cannot oppose it. You cannot even try to change it. You cannot start to understand what it does. Because you cannot see what this chip in your phone is doing when it communicates with the network. You cannot know whether or not it can be remotely activated to open a microphone, to access data from its sensors, from its camera, or to just suck up all the data stored on its memory. So maintaining users in ignorance on how the machine works is one of the key components of this authoritarian nature of technology we are living under right now. The third component is an illusion of security. Once again, by manufacturing ignorance, by making sure that the users won't be able to understand anything, you ensure they won't be able to be part of the security process. Just close your eyes, think on how much Google is your friend, how much Apple is cool and make you look smarter, then open your eyes again, look for a little padlock somewhere, you're safe. That's security. So, in this story, if you're not convinced yet that we're standing closer to the 2029 of Terminator than to the past present of the movie, I encourage you to look at videos of what has been produced by this company, Boston Dynamics. So, sorry for the parentheses here, I just love those robots. Killer robots, yay! Killer robots developed by this company that was officially a military contractant to the US, contracting for the US Navy, before Google bought it in 2013. And since then bought 5 or 6 other robotic companies. So ask yourself, all the data in the world with closed hardware and software we cannot understand and cannot control, with an illusion of security in the hands of the same people owning and developing killer robots, what could possibly go wrong? So in our story, you may be wondering, it's a bit confusing, no? Going from past to present future, and the such. In the movie Terminator, this guy, Kyle Reese, is projected from the dark future to alert everyone in the present and enable people in the present to understand and act. By the way, anyone here has time travel? Oh, shit. Well, if you do, come and talk to me later. We can think of what to do when we have it in order to fix things. But until we have it, who is our Kyle Reese? Well, courageous individuals living in this dark dystopian future, coming to us to enable us, tell us what world we're living, and give us tools, intellectual tools, to understand and act. This guy is Kyle Reese. With Manning, Assange, all the unknowns, and all the future whistleblowers shining the light on the dystopian world we're living in, we owe them the understanding, and we owe them the fact that we have no longer any excuse not to act upon it. So what we do next? Who is Sarah Connor? Who is this heroic human being who actually has no clue she is heroic? Who is this random Jane living a comfortable life, struggling to make ends meet, who sometime will meet her fate, sometimes will hear a story impossible to believe, a story that reaches beyond the boundaries of what a single human brain can comprehend. But we'll nevertheless understand that this is the face of humanity. This is the faith of humanity that is at stake here. My theory is that we are all, individually and collectively, that Sarah Connor. That we all heard the story from Snowden. We all heard the story from Kyle Ed Snowden Reese. And that we now all have a responsibility, not only to ourselves, but to the next generation. The generation we will conceive the John Connors of this world, will be the one in the deepest shit. The ones who didn't see the light of a blue sky and will be born under this gray sky of tyranny. Those are the ones we are working for today. So how do we do that? Well, in the movie Terminator, they end up building pipe bombs. I leave tactical choices to you guys. But I wouldn't advocate for building pipe bombs, and it's messy anyway, and who likes pipe bombs? You? Okay. You're anonymous, don't worry. So, how do we do it? How do we do it? How do we fight the machine? How do we fight the interconnected devices that got out of our hands? Well, from a hacker's point of view, most of the solution is already as concepts between our hands. If you look in the mirror at those design patterns I described earlier for technology that controls us, you'll see the design patterns for technology that liberates us. Of course, in the mirror of those hyper-centralized services and communications, we have decentralization of service and communications. Of course, not the full decentralization, the dream, the ultimate objective of a freedom box, as Eben Moglen puts it. A tiny device that will be under our own control in our home, holding our pictures, or mails, or files, and enabling us to choose individually and collectively with whoever we want to share it. This is the ultimate goal. But we can make steps towards this way by giving up the Googles and the Facebooks, by mutualizing resources to collectively own means of communications, mail servers, chat servers, web servers, and whatnot. This is the way to go. This is the Tao of the internet. Second, in the mirror of those closed down software and hardware, of course, is free software. Free, libre software. Free as in freedom. Free as in free speech. Software that has been created by their authors in such a way that they will belong to humanity as a whole. Software we collectively own, and over which we collectively own the capacity of understanding and controlling them. It is the only way we can collectively take back control of the machines. Of course, hardware is maybe even a bigger problem, because we lag so long behind what is possible today. Only China can make those tiny chips. And in all of those mobile devices, you have one of those baseband processors, which specifications are completely closed. We have no way of knowing what those chips do, and therefore no way of controlling them by ourselves with free software. It is a challenge of tremendous size. It is an industrial objective that great nations such as Germany or maybe Brazil alone cannot probably succeed at. And this is an open question. In the mirror of the illusion of security, we have security in our own hands, security under our own control through end-to-end encryption. No third party to trust, no point-to-point encryption. When things get encrypted between your mobile device and the tower, but then are not encrypted when they're between the tower and the rest of the network. And we know NSA access your communication after the tower. So what use is point-to-point encryption? No. End-to-end encryption, where you generate an encryption key, I generate an encryption key. We share them, and we do not need to trust much more than mathematics, the software implementation of those mathematics, and ourselves to establish a level of trust that we can assess, that we can understand. Some will think, oh yeah, but those technologies for control, they're so user-friendly. And those technology that liberates, they're so complicated and I can't understand them because I am not a hacker, a genius, a nerd, a whatnot. I think this is one of the strongest most important, most invisible glass ceilings we have to break. And it is about empowerment. It is about empowerment because, A, we know that user-friendly is actually user-enemy in most cases. That those choices that are being made for you are actually choices that are made against you, against your interest, but to serve the interest of the machine. And in the other hand, what it means is that technology that appears too complicated is actually accessible for everyone to understand and to share. Therefore, the only way to do it is to appropriate those technology and appropriate the knowledge on how to use the technology and share this knowledge around. This is something we can do. This is something we can do individually and collectively. My point here is that indeed we have to build the tools. We have to improve these pieces of free software and hardware and end-to-end encryption and decentralized services. Of course, we need the politics. We need to jail the motherfuckers who violate massively our fundamental freedoms. We need the members of the parliament to have no other choice than to account for what they do when they authorize mass surveillance and organize its impunity like they just did in France yesterday by adopting the surveillance bill. Of course, we have to craft new pieces of legislation to ensure an uncompromising defense of our fundamental freedoms and have those laws adopted by wide majorities. Of course, we have to fight for that. But one field we probably didn't invest as much as those two, and that is probably equally powerful, if not more, because it may enable the two first ones, is those cultural aspects, those purely intellectual aspects that go from one brain to another, like a meme, like a story. With those means, I'm convinced we can find ways with our intelligence, with our imagination, with our courage, to get to the technological and political and cultural contexts in which, ultimately, we will crush the motherfuckers. Let's do it. I thank you very much. Thanks. Save your energy. Save your energy. Save your energy to crush the fuckers and for the party later on. I mentioned here Terminatorstudies.org, my dear friend Jean-Ba and his amazing art/research project that was a strong inspiration for that. I think we have time for a couple of questions and we have the rest of our lives too. Yeah, keep on discussing it and keep on fighting.
So we have a 15-minute break, but if you want to stay, he can answer a couple of questions. I'm curious how many people are...